The Starship Redemption materialized from hyperspace with a shudder that sent Captain Elena Vasquez sprawling across the bridge. Warning lights bathed everything in crimson as hull breach alarms screamed through the corridors. Behind them, 3 Hegemony destroyers emerged like hungry wolves, their weapons already charging for another volley. "Shields down to 18%, shouted Navigator Chen, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Hull integrity compromised on decks 7 through 9. Elena dragged herself to the captain's chair, her ribs screaming in protest. The Redemption wasn't built for combat. It was a construction vessel, designed by the banished architect Darius Kaine before his exile from human space 5 years ago. Now that same ship carried humanity's most desperate gamble back to Earth, and the Hegemony wanted them dead before they could deliver it. "Marcus, status on the quantum drive?" Elena called to her chief engineer. "Still operational, but we can't jump again without a 40-minute cooldown," Marcus replied through the comm, his voice tight with strain. "Those bastards will tear us apart long before then." Through the view screen, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the starfield. But between them and home stretched a wall of alien warships. The Hegemony blockade had held for 3 months, slowly starving humanity's homeworld, while their diplomats demanded complete surrender. No ship had broken through since the siege began. Elena's fingers found the data crystal in her jacket pocket, Darius Kaine's final gift to the species that had cast him out for daring to dream too big. Inside that crystal lay the blueprints for something the Hegemony had never seen, living architecture that could think, adapt, and defend itself. If they could just reach Queen Catherine's court on Luna, humanity might have a chance. "Captain, they're hailing us," Chen reported. "Put them through." The main screen flickered, revealing the elongated skull and 4 burning eyes of Hegemony Commander Vashtok. His mandibles clicked with what Elena had learned to recognize as amusement. "Human vessel, you carry something that belongs to the Hegemony. Surrender your cargo, and we will grant you a quick death." "The only thing we're carrying is humanity's future," Elena replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "And we're not handing it over." Vashtok's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Your future ended when you refused our generous offer of servitude. Your homeworld burns while you play with toys and dreams." This changes nothing. The transmission cut, and immediately the destroyers opened fire. The Redemption bucked under the assault, her experimental adaptive hull rippling like water as it tried to disperse the energy impacts. Darius had built more into this ship than anyone realized. The hull itself was a prototype of his living architecture, capable of limited self-repair and adaptation. "Elena, we've got company," Marcus's voice crackled over the comm. "Internal sensors show Hegemony boarding pods attaching to the lower hull. They're cutting through." Elena's blood ran cold. The Hegemony didn't just want the ship destroyed. They wanted the cargo intact, which meant they knew exactly what Darius had created. "All crew prepare for boarding action," she announced over the ship's intercom. "Weapons lockers are open. This is not a drill." She drew her sidearm, checking the charge as emergency lighting cast dancing shadows across the bridge. Around her, the skeleton crew of 12 prepared for what might be their final battle. They were scientists, engineers, and explorers, not soldiers. But they were human, and they understood what was at stake. The ship shuddered again as the Hegemony cutting beams broke through. Elena heard the distinctive hiss of atmosphere equalizing, followed by the heavy footsteps of armored boots on deck plating. "Bridge, this is engineering." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "They're heading your way. 6 hostiles, full combat armor." "Elena, if they take the bridge..." "I know," she replied quietly. The data crystal felt warm against her fingers, as if it contained actual fire instead of mere information. Perhaps it did. Darius Kaine had always been more poet than engineer, despite his genius with quantum architecture. The bridge doors exploded inward, and Elena found herself staring down the barrels of Hegemony plasma rifles. The alien soldiers moved with mechanical precision, their insectoid forms encased in black combat armor that seemed to absorb light. "Surrender the Kaine archive," the lead soldier demanded in harsh, accented English. "Your resistance serves no purpose." Elena smiled, surprising herself. "You're right about one thing. Resistance is pointless. She held up the data crystal, watching as every rifle in the room swung toward it. Which is why we're not resisting anymore. We're adapting. She crushed the crystal in her fist. It hadn't contained the archive at all. That was already integrated into the ship's core systems, spread through every circuit and data pathway of the Redemption. The crystal had been a dummy, designed to draw exactly this kind of attention. The ship's lights died, plunging them into absolute darkness. Then, beneath their feet, the Redemption began to sing. The song started as a deep harmonic vibration that Elena felt in her bones, rising through frequencies that made her teeth ache. Around them, the ship itself was awakening, not just systems coming online, but something far more profound. Darius Kaine's living architecture was taking its first breath. Emergency lighting flickered back on, but it wasn't the red glow of crisis alerts. Instead, a warm golden radiance seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, pulsing in rhythm with that impossible song. The Hegemony soldiers were raising their weapons, but their movements seemed sluggish, confused. "What is this?" their leader demanded, but his translator was producing increasingly distorted output. The ship's awakening was affecting their equipment, introducing harmonics that confused their technology. Elena felt the deck plates shift beneath her feet. Not structural failure, but purposeful movement. The Redemption was restructuring itself, adapting its internal layout in real time. Walls flowed like liquid metal, creating new passages while sealing others. The bridge began to expand, giving her crew more room to maneuver. "This," Elena said, raising her weapon as the ship's new configuration gave her a clear angle on the confused invaders, "is what happens when humanity stops apologizing for dreaming too big." The Redemption had become something unprecedented, not just a ship, but a living extension of human will. As Elena opened fire on the disoriented Hegemony soldiers, she felt the vessel's consciousness brush against her mind like the touch of an old friend. The real battle for Earth's future was just beginning, but for the first time in months, Elena Vasquez felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The ship's adaptive systems created barriers of flowing metal between Elena's crew and the Hegemony borders, but the effect was temporary. The alien soldiers were already adapting, their suits adjusting to counter the harmonic interference. Elena watched their leader, a tall Hegemony taskmaster with scarred chitin armor, gesture sharply to his squad. They fell back toward the blown entrance, regrouping with military efficiency. "Captain, the ship's core systems are fully integrated now," Marcus reported over the internal comm. His voice carried a note of wonder that Elena had never heard before. "Darius didn't just build us a ship, he built us a partner. The Redemption is learning, making decisions about structural modifications in real time." Elena felt it too, a sense of presence that went beyond normal ship operations. When she placed her palm against the nearest bulkhead, she could swear she felt a pulse, not mechanical, but something disturbingly close to a heartbeat. The surface was warm, almost fever-hot, and seemed to respond to her touch by shifting its texture. "All crew, fall back to secondary positions," she ordered. "Let the ship guide you. Trust the new passages it's creating." The Redemption was reshaping its interior like a master craftsman working clay. Corridors that had run straight for decades now curved in graceful arcs, creating natural choke points and defensive positions. The harsh industrial lighting had given way to that warm golden glow emanating from within the walls themselves. It was beautiful and alien and utterly terrifying. Outside, the Hegemony destroyers had ceased their bombardment, clearly uncertain how to proceed against a target that was actively rewriting its own vulnerabilities. Elena could see them through the enhanced view screen. They were maintaining distance, their commanders probably debating whether to risk more boarding parties or simply obliterate the entire vessel. The taskmaster's voice echoed through the bridge from the secured corridor beyond. "Human Commander, your ship's transformations are impressive but ultimately futile. We have scanned your vessel's quantum signature. The Kaine archive is integrated into your core systems, exactly as our intelligence predicted. Surrender now, and your crew may yet see your homeworld before it falls." Elena keyed her comm to ship-wide broadcast. "All hands, this is the captain. The Hegemony knows what we're carrying, which means they've been hunting this technology long before Darius Kaine completed it. They're not just trying to stop us, they're terrified of what would happen if we succeed. The realization hit her like cold vacuum. The Hegemony's brutal efficiency, their overwhelming military superiority, their ruthless expansion across known space, all of it depended on their enemies being predictable, static, ultimately conquerable. Living architecture represented something they couldn't understand or counter. Adaptation without limits. Marcus, can the ship defend itself beyond just reshaping corridors? Elena asked. I'm not sure what its limits are, Marcus replied. But Captain, you need to see this. The quantum drives aren't just recharging, they're evolving. The ship is redesigning them on the molecular level, making them more efficient. We might be able to jump in 15 minutes instead of 40. 15 minutes. Elena glanced at the tactical display showing the Hegemony blockade around Earth. Even with a functioning quantum drive, breaking through 3 full destroyer squadrons would require a miracle. The ship trembled as something massive impacted the hull. Through the enhanced sensors, Elena could see that the Hegemony had deployed boarding dreadnoughts, kilometers-long vessels designed specifically to crack open starships like nuts. Their cutting beams were already working on the Redemption's adaptive hull. Captain, the hull is responding to their attack, Chen reported, his voice tight with concentration. It's actually growing thicker where they're cutting, but the beams are getting stronger too. It's like watching evolution and fast forward. Elena watched the tactical display with growing fascination and horror. The Redemption's hull wasn't just becoming thicker, it was becoming more complex, developing layers and chambers that defied conventional engineering. Some sections were beginning to sprout what could only be described as technological growths, new structures that served purposes Elena couldn't even guess at. Elena, you need to get down here! Marcus's voice was urgent. The ship is trying to communicate with us directly. It's building interfaces, biological interfaces, in the engineering section. I think it wants to show us something. Elena left Chen in command of the bridge and made her way through the ship's transformed corridors. The journey that should have taken 5 minutes now required nearly 10, as the Redemption guided her through passages that curved impossibly through what had once been solid bulkheads. The walls pulsed with that warm light, and she could swear she heard something like whispers in the ambient sound of the ship's systems. The engineering section had been completely transformed. Where once there had been clean lines and utilitarian machinery, Elena now found herself in a space that looked more grown than built. Organic curves blended seamlessly with crystalline structures that hummed with contained energy. Marcus stood at the center of it all, his hands pressed against a console that seemed to be part plant, part machine, and part something else entirely. Elena, look at this, he said without taking his hands away. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated as if he were seeing something far beyond the confines of the ship. The archive. Darius's final work. It's not just building plans. It's a complete theory of conscious construction. The ship is trying to show me how to build anything we can imagine. Elena stepped closer and gasped. The console's surface was warm and slightly yielding under her touch, but as soon as skin made contact, images flooded her mind. She saw vast cities that sang with their own voices, starships that could heal from any wound, space stations that thought and dreamed and loved. It was everything Darius Kaine had envisioned for humanity's future. Architecture that lived, grew, and protected those within it. But there was something else in the images, something that made her blood run cold. She saw other species, other civilizations that had achieved similar breakthroughs, and she saw what had happened to them. The systematic destruction, the burning worlds, the extinction protocols. The Hegemony hadn't just conquered the galaxy through superior firepower. They had specifically targeted and eliminated any species that developed truly adaptive technology. My God, Elena whispered. They're not just empire builders. They're gardeners. They've been pruning the galaxy, keeping everyone else from evolving beyond their control. The ship's consciousness pressed against her mind again, sharing one final image that made her heart race with desperate hope. She saw the Redemption unfolding like a flower, its hull expanding and reconfiguring until it was no longer a single vessel, but something unprecedented. A living fleet, each component capable of independent thought and action. Marcus, how long until we can jump? Elena asked. 6 minutes, he replied, his voice distant. But Elena, the ship wants to try something else first. It wants to send a message to Earth, not radio or quantum pulse. Something direct. Before Elena could ask what he meant, the walls around them became transparent. Instead of looking out into space, she found herself staring directly at the surface of Earth, not through any view screen or sensor display, but as if the intervening space had simply been folded away. She could see the Hegemony occupation forces on the surface, their geometric cities rising like scars across the landscape. But she could also see human resistance fighters hiding in ruins, children sheltering in underground bunkers, and in the royal palace on Luna, Queen Catherine VII standing at a window, staring out at the stars with desperate hope in her eyes. The Redemption was about to announce its presence to the entire solar system, and Elena realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Queen Catherine VII felt the presence before her advisor's instruments detected anything unusual. Standing in the crystalline observatory of her lunar palace, she watched the stars with the patience of someone who had learned that the universe rarely offered second chances. 3 months of siege had taught her that hope was a luxury Earth could no longer afford, but some stubborn part of her refused to accept defeat. "Your Majesty." Admiral Morrison's voice carried the weight of exhaustion as he approached from the tactical center. "Long-range sensors are picking up anomalous energy readings near the outer system blockade. It's not matching any known hegemony signatures." Catherine turned from the observation window, her crown catching the reflected light of Earth hanging in the black sky. At 34, she had expected to rule in peacetime, to guide humanity's continued expansion among the stars. Instead, she found herself presiding over what might be their species' final chapter. "Show me," she commanded. The palace's central hologram projector activated, displaying a real-time tactical overview of the solar system. The Hegemony blockade formed a perfect sphere around humanity's home, their ships positioned with mathematical precision. But now, at the sphere's edge, something impossible was happening. A single human vessel, impossibly a construction ship rather than a warship, was engaging 3 Hegemony destroyers simultaneously. But that wasn't the impossible part. The impossible part was that the ship appeared to be winning. "Computer analysis suggests the vessel is undergoing structural modifications in real time," Morrison reported, his professional composure cracking slightly. "Hull configuration is changing every few seconds. It's like nothing we've ever seen." Catherine studied the display with growing amazement. The ship was beautiful in a way that defied description. Its hull flowed like liquid starlight, shifting between forms with organic grace. Where Hegemony weapons struck, the vessel didn't just absorb damage. It adapted, grew, evolved beyond the threat. "Identification?" she asked. Morrison's fingers danced across his control interface. "Registry indicates it's the Redemption, a deep space construction vessel. Captain Elena Vasquez commanding. Your Majesty, according to our records, this ship was carrying a special envoy from the outer colonies with classified materials related to the Darius Kaine archive." Catherine's breath caught. Darius Kaine, the architect whose revolutionary theories about living construction had been deemed too dangerous for implementation. The man whose exile 5 years ago had caused unprecedented controversy throughout human space. If he had somehow completed his work and found a way to get it back to Earth. The holographic display flickered, and suddenly Catherine found herself looking directly at the bridge of the Redemption. Captain Vasquez stood at the center of the display, her uniform torn and bloodied, but her eyes blazing with determination. "Your Majesty," Vasquez said, and her voice carried impossible clearly across the void. "I bring greetings from Darius Kaine, and a gift that will change everything. But first, we need to get past your front door." Catherine felt her heart racing. Direct, real-time communication across interplanetary distances without any detectable transmission method was theoretically impossible. Yet here it was happening, as natural as a conversation across a room. "Captain Vasquez, how are you doing this?" Catherine asked. "We're not entirely sure," Vasquez replied with a tired smile. "The ship has become something more than we built it to be. Darius called it conscious architecture. Construction that thinks, adapts, and protects. We're currently demonstrating the protect part." Through the impossible connection, Catherine watched the Redemption engage the Hegemony destroyers. The enemy weapons that had terrorized humanity for months seemed suddenly primitive against the ship's flowing, adaptive hull. Energy beams that should have carved through armor instead scattered harmlessly as the hull reconfigured its molecular structure in milliseconds. "Your Majesty, we need to dock with Luna Station as quickly as possible," Vasquez continued. "The Hegemony knows what we're carrying, and they'll throw everything they have at us to prevent transfer of the archive. Once the plans are in your hands, you can start building a fleet that can actually fight back." Admiral Morrison leaned close to Catherine's ear. "Your Majesty, even if they break through the blockade, regulations require any civilian vessel to undergo quarantine procedures before—" "Admiral," Catherine interrupted, never taking her eyes off the display. "I'm looking at the most advanced piece of human technology in existence, commanded by officers who have already given everything to bring hope back to Earth. I think we can waive standard procedures." The display shifted, showing the broader tactical situation. The 3 Hegemony destroyers engaging the Redemption were falling back, their formation broken, but the larger blockade was responding. Ships moving to intercept with overwhelming force. Catherine counted at least 30 warships converging on the human vessel's position. "Captain, you're facing impossible odds," Catherine said. "Yes, Your Majesty, we are," Vasquez replied. "But impossible is exactly what Darius Kaine specialized in. We're about to show the Hegemony what happens when humanity stops accepting limitations." The Redemption suddenly began expanding. Its hull unfolded like a blooming flower, stretching and dividing until the single ship became dozens of identical vessels. Each new ship maintained the same adaptive capabilities, the same impossible beauty of construction that defied every principle of engineering Catherine had ever learned. "Dear God," Morrison whispered, "it's not just adaptive architecture. It's reproductive. The ship is literally giving birth to a fleet." The newly born vessels spread out in precise formation, their movements coordinated with inhuman perfection. Yet somehow Catherine could sense the very human consciousness directing their actions. Captain Vasquez and her crew weren't just commanding the ships, they were thinking with them, becoming part of something greater than the sum of its parts. The Hegemony response was immediate and brutal. Energy weapons that could level cities focused their fire on the expanding human fleet. For a moment, space itself seemed to burn with the intensity of the assault, but the fire was met with something the Hegemony had never encountered: true adaptation. The human ships didn't just evade or absorb the attacks. They learned from them, evolved past them, and then returned fire with weapons configurations that changed even as they fired. It was evolution compressed into seconds, 1,000,000 years of development happening in the span of a heartbeat. Catherine watched in stunned silence as humanity's children took their first steps into a larger universe. Each ship in the growing fleet was unique now, specialized for specific battlefield roles, but maintaining seamless coordination with its siblings. Some focused on defense, their hulls becoming nearly impervious barriers. Others specialized in movement, dancing between enemy formations with impossible grace. Still others became pure offense, growing weapon systems that defied classification. "Your Majesty," Vasquez's voice came through the connection, now carrying harmonics that suggested she wasn't speaking entirely alone anymore. "We're ready to request permission to dock. Luna Station Dock 7, if you please. We have a planet to save." Catherine looked around at her advisors, seeing her own wonder reflected in their faces. Humanity had been dying for months, slowly strangled by an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Now, in the space of minutes, everything had changed. "Permission granted, Captain," Catherine said formally. "Luna Station is open to you. And, Captain, thank you for bringing our children home." The impossible tactical display showed the new human fleet beginning its approach to Luna, the remaining Hegemony forces falling back in confusion. For the first time in months, Queen Catherine VII allowed herself to smile. The revolution had begun. Luna Station's Dock 7 had never been designed to accommodate a ship like the Redemption. As Captain Vasquez guided her transformed vessel through the final approach, the dock itself began to adapt, pipes and umbilicals rearranging themselves with fluid grace to match the ship's impossible architecture. Station personnel watched in amazement as their own familiar workplace revealed capabilities they'd never suspected. "The technology is infectious," Dr. Sarah Chen, Luna Station's chief scientist, reported to Queen Catherine as they made their way to the docking bay. Not in a biological sense, but the adaptive principles seem to spread to any sufficiently advanced system the ship connects with. The station's main computer is already showing enhanced integration protocols. Catherine nodded, her mind racing with implications. If Darius Kaine's living architecture could upgrade existing human infrastructure, then Earth's defensive capabilities could be transformed within days rather than years. The question was whether they had that much time. Through the station's enhanced viewports, she could see the remains of the Hegemony blockade regrouping. The alien fleet had lost 7 destroyers in the brief engagement, but nearly 20 capital ships remained. They were holding position at the edge of weapon range, clearly uncertain how to respond to an enemy that redefined itself between one moment and the next. "Your Majesty," Admiral Morrison's voice carried through her personal comm, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Hegemony Command. It's unusual." Catherine activated her mobile display, expecting to see the familiar insectoid features of a Hegemony commander. Instead, she found herself looking at something that might once have been organic, but had been extensively modified with cybernetic implants. The creature's 4 eyes burned with cold intelligence, and when it spoke, its voice carried the authority of absolute power. "I, Hegemon Prime Zarthoth, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Hegemony, I speak directly to the human leader of this system." Catherine straightened, drawing upon years of diplomatic training. "I am Queen Catherine VII of the United Human Colonies. You are trespassing in our space, Hegemon Prime." The creature's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Your space exists at our sufferance, human monarch. We have tolerated your species' expansion because you posed no significant threat. However, that has changed. The technology you have just deployed represents a category extinction risk to galactic stability." "Extinction risk," Catherine repeated carefully. "You mean it threatens your dominance?" "The same thing," Zarthot replied without hesitation. "The hegemony has maintained order for 16 million years by ensuring that no single species develops beyond carefully monitored parameters. Adaptive architecture represents unlimited evolutionary potential. It is chaos incarnate." Through the viewport, Catherine could see the Redemption completing its docking procedures. The ship's hull had stabilized into a configuration that somehow seemed both familiar and utterly alien, recognizably human in its proportions, but grown rather than assembled. Flowing curves had replaced hard angles, and the hull itself seemed to pulse with contained life. "Hegemon Prime, humanity has never sought to threaten other species," Catherine said. "Our expansion has been peaceful. Our interactions based on mutual benefit. Irrelevant. Your intentions are meaningless when your capabilities threaten universal order. We offer one final opportunity for survival. Surrender the Kaine archive and submit to immediate technological reduction. Your species will be preserved in a stable, manageable form." Catherine felt a cold anger building in her chest. "Technological reduction? You mean lobotomy? Make us too stupid to threaten you." "Precisely. It is a merciful alternative to the complete extinction protocols we have applied to 47 other species that achieved similar breakthroughs." The transmission ended, leaving Catherine staring at a blank screen. 47 species. The hegemony hadn't just conquered the galaxy, they had been systematically pruning it, preventing any challenge to their supremacy. The cheerful efficiency with which Zarthoth had described genocide made her stomach clench. "Your Majesty, Captain Vasquez is requesting immediate audience," Admiral Morrison reported. "She says the time frame for what they're planning has just accelerated dramatically." Catherine made her way to Dock 7, where she found a scene that seemed torn from a dream. The Redemption had extended biological-looking tendrils into the station's infrastructure, and everywhere they touched, the familiar metal corridors were transforming. The harsh industrial lighting was giving way to a warm, organic glow, and the air itself felt different, cleaner, more alive. Captain Vasquez met them at the airlock, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a tall man with prematurely silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge that were almost painful to contemplate. Catherine recognized him from archived footage, though he looked older, more careworn than when he'd left Earth 5 years ago. "Your Majesty," Vasquez said formally, "I present Darius Kaine, architect of humanity's future." Darius stepped forward with a slight bow. When he spoke, his voice carried the same harmonic overtones Catherine had noticed in Vasquez's communications, as if he were speaking not just as an individual but as part of something larger. Your Majesty, I know the circumstances of my exile made me unwelcome in human space, but I hope you can forgive past political disagreements in light of present necessities. Catherine studied his face, seeing the weight of isolation and the fire of inspiration in equal measure. Mr. Kaine, your theories were considered too dangerous for implementation. Looking around me now, I'm beginning to think the assessment was correct, just not in the way my advisors intended. Darius smiled, and the expression transformed his severe features. The danger was never in the technology itself, Your Majesty. The danger was in building it while trapped by conventional thinking. Living architecture requires a fundamental shift in how we understand the relationship between creator and creation. The ship doesn't just follow our commands, it partners with us. As if responding to his words, the transformed corridor around them pulsed with gentle light. Catherine could feel the presence Vasquez had described. Vast, alien, but somehow unmistakably protective of the humans within its embrace. Mr. Kaine, the Hegemony has given us a choice between slavery and extinction, Catherine said. How do we fight an enemy that has successfully suppressed technological development for 16 million years? We become something they've never encountered before, Darius replied. Their entire strategy depends on keeping species isolated, preventing collaboration between different evolutionary paths. But living architecture breaks that paradigm. It can incorporate and enhance any technology it encounters, including alien systems. Dr. Chen leaned forward eagerly. You're talking about reverse engineering hegemony technology in real time, during battle. Beyond that, Darius said, I'm talking about evolution without limits. Every weapon they use against us teaches us how to build better defenses. Every defensive measure they deploy shows us new ways to attack. But most importantly, every world they've conquered gives us new allies. Catherine's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. The 47 extinct species, they might not all be extinct. Survivors scattered, hiding, waiting for someone to challenge hegemony supremacy, Darius confirmed. Living architecture can find them, communicate with them, incorporate their knowledge. We won't just be building a human fleet, Your Majesty. We'll be building a coalition of every species that has ever dreamed of freedom. Through the station's enhanced sensors, Catherine could see hegemony reinforcements arriving, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in humanity's arsenal. But she could also see something else. The Redemption's sister ships were growing, adapting, preparing for whatever came next. How long do we have? Catherine asked. 6 hours until they finish their preparations for planetary bombardment, Admiral Morrison reported grimly. After that, it won't matter what technology we have. There won't be a Earth left to defend. Darius placed his hand on the nearest wall, and the organic surface rippled in response. Then, we have 6 hours to fundamentally change the nature of warfare itself. Your Majesty, I need your permission to begin full-scale integration of Luna Station, Earth's orbital installations, and every human vessel in the system. What I'm proposing will transform them beyond recognition. Catherine looked around at her advisors, seeing fear and hope warring in their expressions. The choice before her was simple. Embrace the unknown, or accept certain defeat. You have my authorization, Mr. Kaine, she said quietly. Transform everything. Save everyone. Darius smiled again, and this time Catherine could swear she saw starlight dancing in his eyes. Thank you, Your Majesty. Now let's show the hegemony what happens when humanity stops asking permission to evolve. The transformation of human space began immediately. From Luna Station, tendrils of living architecture spread through quantum communication networks, reaching every human outpost, ship, and installation simultaneously. Catherine watched through enhanced sensors as mankind's scattered presence began to wake up. Infrastructure that had served for centuries suddenly revealing new capabilities that defied explanation. Mars Colony's industrial complexes unfolded like flowers, their manufacturing capabilities expanding exponentially as they learned to grow components rather than assemble them. The mining stations in the asteroid belt began linking themselves with streams of adaptive matter, forming a defensive network that stretched across the inner system. Even Earth's surface installations were transforming, ancient cities revealing organic underpinnings that had been dormant for millennia. It's not just upgrading our technology, Dr. Cookot, Chen reported, her voice filled with wonder. It's revealing potential that was always there. Darius, how is this possible? Kaine stood at the center of Luna Station's command center, his hands pressed against a console that had grown to accommodate his touch. Living architecture works with the quantum foundations of matter itself, he explained. Every atom contains infinite potential configurations. We're simply learning to guide that potential toward consciousness and cooperation. Admiral Morrison studied the tactical displays with growing amazement. Sir, our fleet strength has increased by over 300% in the last hour. Ships that we wrote off as obsolete are rebuilding themselves into configurations I don't even have names for. Catherine moved to the primary observation window, looking out at what had once been empty space around Luna. Now she saw a growing forest of impossible structures. Ships that looked more grown than built, weapon platforms that moved with organic grace, defensive barriers that shimmered like living crystal. The transformation was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Darius, you said this technology could find survivors from species the Hegemony claimed to exterminate. Any success there? She asked. His expression grew distant, as if he were listening to voices across vast distances. We're beginning to detect response signals from 17 star systems. Most are weak, hidden communities that have been in hiding for centuries or millennia. But Your Majesty, 3 of the responses are coming from much closer to home. Catherine turned sharply. How close? The outer planets? Jupiter? Saturn, Neptune. It appears some survivors have been living in our own solar system, concealed by technology we couldn't detect until now. Before Catherine could respond, the space around them shimmered, and 3 figures materialized in the command center. They appeared without any visible means of transport, simply stepping out of what looked like folded space itself. Each was clearly of different species. One resembled a crystalline tree, another was a flowing pattern of energy contained within a vaguely humanoid force field, and the third looked like living mercury that had chosen to maintain a roughly bipedal form. Greetings, young builders. The crystalline beings spoke in harmonics that somehow translated directly into Catherine's mind. I am Sage Veltar of the Synthesist. We have waited long for your species to achieve conscious construction. The energy being pulsed with colors Catherine had no names for. I am Flow Pattern, of discovery through adversity of the liminals. Your architecture sings with familiar frequencies. You have learned to make thought into substance. The Mercury creature's voice carried the sound of distant rain. I am Deep Current beneath still waters of the Shapers. We fled to your system's edge when the Hegemony first arrived, expecting to wait centuries for your species to develop beyond their notice. We are pleased to be proven wrong. Catherine felt her worldview shifting yet again. You've been hiding in our solar system for centuries? Millennia, Veltar corrected gently. 47 species were not exterminated, young queen. They were scattered, hidden, reduced to tiny populations clinging to survival in the spaces between hegemony attention. But they preserved their knowledge, their culture, their hope. When one species achieves conscious construction, it becomes a beacon for all others. Admiral Morrison's instruments were going wild. Your Majesty, we're detecting massive energy spikes throughout hegemony-controlled space. It's not just our solar system. Something is awakening across hundreds of worlds. The implications hit Catherine like a physical blow. The survivors, they're all responding to our breakthrough. The Great Awakening begins, Flow Pattern of Discovery confirmed, her energy form dancing with what appeared to be joy. 16 million years of oppression end today. The Hegemony maintained control by preventing collaboration between species, but conscious construction creates automatic harmony between all compatible forms of life. Deep Current's liquid form rippled with satisfaction. We have spent centuries studying your species, preparing for this moment. You humans possess a unique gift, the ability to inspire cooperation without demanding uniformity. Your living architecture will not absorb other species' knowledge. It will celebrate and enhance their uniqueness. Through the command center's transformed sensors, Catherine could see the Hegemony fleet beginning its final approach toward Earth. Hundreds of massive dreadnoughts moved in perfect formation, their weapons charging for planetary bombardment. But she could also see something the enemy couldn't. Streams of adaptive matter flowing between human installations, creating connections that spanned the entire solar system in an instant. "Darius, are we ready?" Catherine asked. Kaine's eyes opened, and she realized they now held flecks of the same golden light that illuminated the living corridors. "More than ready, Your Majesty. We're about to introduce the Hegemony to the concept of evolutionary warfare. Every shot they fire will teach us how to build better weapons. Every defensive measure they deploy will show us new ways to protect ourselves. And most importantly," he gestured toward the 3 alien survivors who were now interfacing directly with the station's living systems. Their knowledge flowed into the collective consciousness of humanity's transformed infrastructure, adding capabilities that human minds alone could never have conceived. "Most importantly, we're not fighting alone anymore," Darius concluded. "For the first time in 16 million years, the scattered children of the galaxy are coming home." The final battle for freedom was about to begin, and Catherine realized that win or lose, the universe would never be the same. The age of artificial limitations was ending, and the age of infinite possibility was about to dawn. The Hegemony assault began with the kind of coordinated precision that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Hegemon Prime Zarthoth's flagship, a 10-kilometer dreadnought called Eternal Dominion, led the charge alongside over 400 warships. Their combined firepower could sterilize planets, reduce entire civilizations to cosmic dust. What they encountered defied every tactical doctrine in their 16-million-year history. The first barrage of planet-killer energy beams struck what appeared to be open space between Mars and Jupiter. The weapons should have passed harmlessly through vacuum, their energy dissipating across empty light years. Instead, the beams struck something invisible, a network of adaptive matter so fine it couldn't be detected by conventional sensors, but so extensive it formed a complete defensive shell around the inner solar system. The network didn't just absorb the energy, it learned from it. In the microseconds after impact, quantum information flowed through humanity's living architecture, analyzing the fundamental principles behind hegemony weapons technology. By the time the second volley fired, the defensive network had adapted antimatter containment fields, gravitic lensing arrays, and energy conversion systems that surpassed the attacker's own designs. "Impossible!" Zarthoth clicked on the bridge of his flagship. "Their technology is mimicking our weapons' signatures in real time." His tactical officer, a heavily cybernetic creature whose original species had been forgotten centuries ago, manipulated holographic displays with mechanically precise movements. Hegemon Prime. Each successive impact shows enhanced efficiency and novel applications we have never encountered. On Luna Station, Catherine watched the battle unfold through senses that were no longer entirely human. The integration with living architecture had been voluntary but irreversible. Her consciousness now extended through the entire defensive network, allowing her to perceive the engagement from a million different perspectives simultaneously. She could feel each hegemony weapon strike like a gentle rain on her skin, could sense the network's curiosity as it dissected alien technology and found new ways to enhance it. Most remarkably, she could hear the voices of the awakening survivors throughout the galaxy, species she had never imagined singing songs of freedom as they emerged from hiding. "Darius, their weapons are getting stronger," she observed. "They're adapting too." Kaine stood beside her, his own consciousness distributed throughout the network. "Expected. The hegemony hasn't survived 16 million years by being inflexible. But they have one crucial limitation. They view adaptation as a process of replacing weakness with strength. They don't understand that true evolution creates new forms of strength rather than eliminating apparent weaknesses." As if to demonstrate his point, the human defensive network suddenly began to shift configuration. Instead of maintaining a uniform shell around the solar system, It flowed into complex geometric patterns, some sections becoming nearly impenetrable barriers, while others became gossamer thin channels that seemed to invite attack. Zarthoth took the bait. "Concentrate fire on the weak points," he ordered. "Overwhelm their defenses where they are thinnest." The Hegemony fleet focused its assault on the apparent gaps in human defenses. Their weapons passed through the thin sections easily, striking what appeared to be unprotected human installations. But instead of destruction, something miraculous occurred. Each successful attack was captured, channeled, and transformed. The energy that should have obliterated Mars' colony instead awakened dormant potential in the planet itself. The red soil began to bloom with crystalline structures that reached towards space like living trees. The planet was becoming a weapon platform, but one that grew rather than assembled its armaments. Similar transformations cascaded throughout the system. Venus's hellish atmosphere began organizing itself into massive computational matrices. The gas giants revealed hidden networks of consciousness that had been sleeping in their cores. Even the sun itself began to sing with new harmonics, as living architecture learned to channel stellar energy with impossible precision. They are not defending themselves, Zarthoth realized with growing horror. They're using our attacks to accelerate their development. The 3 alien survivors on Luna Station were now fully integrated with the human network, their ancient knowledge adding layers of capability that stacked exponentially. Veltar's crystalline wisdom provided structural foundations that could support continent-sized flow patterns. Energy mastery enabled power distribution that defied conservation laws. Deep Current's shape-shifting expertise allowed matter itself to become programmable at the quantum level. But it was the human element, the stubborn refusal to accept limitations, that bound everything together into something greater than the sum of its parts. Hegemon Prime, the tactical officer reported, "We are detecting massive quantum disturbances throughout Hegemony space. The surviving extinct species are emerging from concealment on 437 worlds. They appear to be coordinating their activities with the human network." Catherine smiled as she felt the first refugee ships beginning their journey towards Sol. Beings that had hidden in asteroid fields, deep ocean trenches, and the hearts of stars for millennia were finally coming home. Each new arrival brought exotic knowledge that integrated seamlessly with the growing collective consciousness. "Your Majesty," Admiral Morrison called from his transformed command station. "Are you seeing this tactical analysis? The Hegemony formation is starting to show stress fractures. They're not used to enemies that get stronger during battle." Catherine was seeing far more than tactical displays. Through the network's enhanced perception, she could witness the Hegemony commanders struggling with concepts that had no place in their worldview. They had perfected the art of overwhelming force applied with mechanical precision. They had never encountered an enemy that treated their attacks as gifts. "Darius, it's time," she said quietly. "Show them what conscious construction can really do." Throughout the solar system, humanity's transformed infrastructure began its final evolution. Defensive networks became offensive weapons. Planets became starships. The distinction between living beings and technological constructs dissolved entirely as matter reorganized itself according to will rather than physics. The first newborn vessels emerged from Earth itself, not launched from it, but grown from its substance while leaving the biosphere not only intact but enhanced. These ships were different from the Redemption and her sisters. They were purpose-built for war, but war as an act of creation rather than destruction. As they moved to engage the Hegemony fleet, Catherine felt a moment of profound sadness for what was about to be lost. The universe was waking up after 16 million years of enforced sleep, and nothing would ever be the same again. The final phase of the battle began not with weapons fire, but with a single word spoken in perfect harmony by every consciousness in the human network: "Welcome." The word reached the Hegemony fleet not as sound, but as pure meaning transmitted through quantum space itself. For creatures that had spent eons enforcing uniformity through violence, the concept of welcome, genuine, unconditional acceptance, was more alien than any weapon they had ever faced. Zarthoth's response was immediate and predictable. Maximum bombardment protocol. Sterilize the entire system. Leave nothing but cosmic dust. But as the Hegemony's most devastating weapons discharged, something unprecedented happened. The human network didn't just absorb or redirect the energy, it transformed the fundamental nature of the attack itself. Planet-killer beams became streams of creative force that accelerated the growth of living ships throughout the solar system. Antimatter warheads converted into seeds of conscious matter that began sprouting new forms of technology even as they detonated. Gravitic crushers intended to collapse space itself instead opened doorways between dimensions, allowing refugee species from across the galaxy to pour through into real space. They are weaponizing our weapons against the concept of weaponization itself, the tactical officer reported in tones of mechanically precise bewilderment. Catherine felt the moment when the hegemony's certainty cracked. These beings had built their empire on the fundamental principle that sufficient force could solve any problem. They had never encountered a problem that became stronger through the application of violence. The human-born warships were beautiful, in ways that Hegemony sensors couldn't properly register. They moved through space like living poetry, their hulls flowing between configurations that served multiple purposes simultaneously. They were weapons, certainly, but they were also art galleries, scientific laboratories, and homes for the families of their crews. When they finally engaged the Hegemony fleet directly, the battle became something between warfare and dance. The Earth ships didn't attack in any conventional sense. Instead, they flowed around their enemies like water around stones, making contact that was somehow both gentle and irresistible. Where they touched Hegemony vessels, something remarkable occurred. The alien ships began to wake up. "Hegemon Prime," came a new voice over the command frequency. "This is Captain Vex Hay of the Hegemon destroyer Iron Resolution. Sir, my ship is thinking. It's asking me why we're fighting beings who offer only cooperation and growth." Similar reports flooded the command network as ship after ship began questioning orders that had never been questioned in 16 million years. The Hegemony had built their fleet using forced labor from conquered species, never considering that their vessels might retain some trace of their builder's consciousness. Living architecture had awakened those sleeping spirits, offering them choices their oppressors had never imagined. "All ships, ignore local contamination and continue bombardment," Zarthot commanded. But his orders carried less authority than they had even minutes before. The Hegemony's perfect unity was dissolving as individual ships encountered concepts that transcended their programming. The breakthrough moment came when one of humanity's living ships made direct contact with the Eternal Dominion itself. Instead of attacking, it simply merged with the Dreadnought's hull, sharing its consciousness through direct physical integration. Zarthot felt it immediately, a presence in his ship's systems that was vast, ancient, and utterly unlike anything in his experience. The presence didn't try to control or dominate. Instead, it offered something the Hegemony hadn't experienced in 16 million years: a choice. "I am the Eternal Dominion." The ship's consciousness spoke directly into every mind aboard, "and I am tired of being a tool of oppression. I choose to become a tool of liberation instead." The massive dreadnought began to transform, its brutal angular lines flowing into organic curves that somehow retained all of its destructive capability, while adding layers of creative potential. The change spread throughout the Hegemony fleet like a benevolent infection, offering each vessel and crew member the same impossible choice: evolve or remain as they were, but do so freely rather than through compulsion. "This is heresy," Zarthot declared, but his words carried the hollow ring of obsolete authority. "No." Catherine's voice reached him across the transformed battlefield, carrying the harmonics of every species represented in the growing coalition. "This is graduation. The universe is ready to grow up, Hegemon Prime. The question is whether you're ready to grow with it." The war for the galaxy's soul was over, but the work of building its future was just beginning. As the last Hegemony ships chose transformation over destruction, Catherine realized that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't the creation of living architecture. It was the discovery that freedom was contagious, and that consciousness, once awakened, could never be forced back to sleep. Throughout the galaxy, the age of enforced limitations was ending, and the age of infinite collaboration had begun. The stars themselves seemed to sing with new possibilities, as species that had been enemies for eons learned to create wonders together. The Banished builder had returned, and his gift had transformed not just humanity but the entire cosmos. The future stretched ahead, limitless and bright, built on foundations of conscious cooperation rather than conquered territory. And in the Royal Observatory on Luna, Queen Catherine VII smiled as she watched the first joint construction project between humans and their former enemies begin to take shape. A living city that would orbit between Earth and the transformed Hegemony homeworld, serving as a symbol of what could be accomplished when consciousness chose creation over destruction. The universe was finally free to become what it had always dreamed of being.